Jack here, JBF Music and Guitar Lessons, back with a concept for you here, presenting my argument as to why all the notes are all good. Well, almost all of them. In this quick guitar tricks, we're looking at what is essentially modal interchange. Don't let the flamboyant terminology put you off, this is a fairly straightforward thing to grasp. Basically swapping different scales, in this case minor ones, which still complement the underlying chord or harmonic content. In layman's terms, it still sounds alright. Now, my chromatic chops are absolutely nowhere near most jazz guitarists, so I'm coming at this from more of a kind of rocker's point of view, I suppose. The timestamps of chapters are as always below. If you like the system, then please do let me know with a comment and like. Both are huge helps to the channel. But yeah, by the end of this, you should have an idea why almost all the notes are pretty much okay. Okay, so that intro lick sounded like decent, okay, I think. Maybe a bit spicy, but overall okay, until that last note, which, if you liked it, fair enough, your jazz palette is much more refined than my own, goes without saying. It certainly was a bit of a crunchy little bugger though, to say the least, isn't it? If we look at that lick, it's in E minor, it's starting off quite pentatonic, and then it actually adds in every chromatic, every out note possible. That is to say that all 12 notes from the scale, or the chromatic scale, are being used. So how and where do all these notes come from? Breaking it down, if we use an E blues scale, you've probably heard it a million times, right? So we can straight away knock all these notes out. We know where they come from, we know where they've been, we know their dirty little secrets.
We note what they did last summer.
Nope. Ah well, I thought that pun was passable. So the Dorian mode, it might sound fancy, it's just a minor scale that contains this note. It's pretty common, you've likely used this if you played any Chuck Berry, you know, the... You know, Hendrix, Clapton, Slash, or even Dimebag Darrell. Again, by itself knocking off a really good whack of those notes. In fact, those aforementioned players would even use this new hybrid skill we've got, the Dorian blues. More on that with little I up there. We can take out another 2 notes with the Phrygian mode. Again, this is a minor scale. It's got a more kind of Spanish sound to it. And what it's doing is sorting out these 2 notes, the flat second and the flat sixth. As a side note, Aeolian would also take out the flat sixth, this one. So most of the notes are accounted for by just using the simple minor scales. The final common minor scale is the harmonic minor. Very Engvy sounding scale. More on that with a little I up there. It's pretty classical and also sort of exotic if you use it a bit more like a blues scale. And that takes care of this final note for us here. The major 7. So with all these 4 scales combined, it looks like in the right context we can probably get away with any note, right? Objection! Well, this guy just won't fit. We're not used to hearing a major third over a minor chord. So it's more jarring. Oddly, the inverse isn't so abhorrent to my commoner ears. The Hendrix chord, for example, it's essentially a major chord at a dominant 7th, but with a minor third on top. And a lot of blues is based on this idea of playing a minor scale over a major dominant 7 chord, you know. But if I switch those thirds on the Hendrix chord, putting the minor on the bottom and moving it to major on the top, suddenly it sounds like I've never played guitar before, let alone bothered to tune the blasted thing. I can try and vamp on it. It's just so unhinged. The more I play that wretched little chord, the more I actually get to like it, within reason. And that's probably the crux of my point here. I've not been exposed to that sound or heard it often enough in a musical context to be okay with it. Unless it was maybe in like a film score designed to create tension. Or a sense of horror, to which its credit, it's doing rather swimmingly. In fact, as a side note, if we flatten this E, we can get an even more spooky chord. Now over this drone you can hear that the other notes, the flat second, the major 7th, the flat 4th, sharp 5, the flat 6th, I suppose even the 4th to a certain extent. Now, they all have some heat, but most of us have heard something similar enough times that it's a bit of a non-issue, in comparison to that most non-heinous card. If ever you want some non-heinous, I think I got that right, Bill and Ted Guitar Licks, check out the little eye up there. But in fact, this chord is so tense that the Hendrix chord, that dominant 7 sharp 11, which is usually used for tension and release, so it's normally used for something like that, it actually sounds like a resolution against this more abhorrent chord. Oh, dearie me. And if you're still with me after that rack and you put up with it, you might as well give subscribe a click and do the old notification thing. Right, I'm going to break down that intro lick because aside from all the notes belonging to some sort of minor scale, we can also apply this concept of tension and release to explain a bit further as to why it sounds alright despite using so many out notes. To quickly clear this up, this is an E minor chord. It's made up of an E, a G, and a B. We call these the root, the flat 3rd, and the 5th. Chord tones. Now technically we're playing over an E minor 7 chord. Basically it just means it's got this note in it, which is a D, and as you probably guessed, if it's an E minor 7, this interval would be called the minor 7th. Still a chord tone. In that context, still a good one to target. Now to my ears, Chris Poland is a player with a really skilled way of using more tense notes but still resolving his licks in pretty unique ways. Some of his signature licks with a card up there. First up, we bend that flat 7th that I've just been harping on about by a tone to hit the root. It's the main note of the underlying chord, so it's really stable. The 4th pops up in passing here. Then I hang on this note a little bit longer, which is E minor's 5th. Again, it's a chord tone. After this little flash flurry of notes, which includes the root, 2nd, flat 3rd, 6th, what we're doing is ending up back on that same 5th. The blues note is then introduced here as a grace note. Just really quickly, you don't really hear it. It's also like it's warming our ears up for when we play it again instead of going straight to 11. And although most of us have probably already heard and indeed played this Dorian blues scale, if we start off a bit more consonant by kind of just hinting at that note, and then kind of getting into dialing up the dissonance if we want to think about it that way, it helps our ears accept it a little bit more. Again, using this 5th as a turning point to go back up the scale, then just full out hitting that blues note for some extra tension. After that, we do however resolve to the root, which is the safest of safe notes, which also acts a bit like a pivot into the Phrygian mode. So there we're going from the root to that flat 9, using the flat 7th down here as well. That Spanish sound that I'd mentioned before, right? Here I used a repeated phrase which just gets moved down a 4th. I'd wager we'd be more willing to accept this dissonant flat 2nd, and to a certain extent the flat 6 as well, based on our brains seeing this pattern, recognising it and going,
oh yeah, him. I know him. He's alright. He's mates with their what's his face? Flat 6. Yeah, that guy. Total legend, mate. Total legend. Bit of an edge to him though, eh?
At least I'm almost certain that's how brains work, because clearly it's a very important subject in music school, contrary to popular belief, and unequivocally what I spent the vast majority of my time studying, as you can likely tell by my high quality bit of sciencing there. They also taught us that word in music school, sciencing. I didn't just make it up or anything preposterous like that. Lofty intellectual topics aside, so heavyweight that they in fact sound uncannily like total nonsense. As a side note, I suspect this is why symmetrical scales on a guitar can work, because you can take a concept and just move it across the strings, and your brain will recognise enough of a pattern that's kind of okay with it. Anyway, in the final bit here, we've got the flat ninth and the major seventh, which are being used to essentially kind of flirt with the root. We're just ducking around it. We're going a semitone above, below, and then resolving to it. And you may have caught me out here. I made a bit of a spectacle of the major third, just to emphasise it being a bit of a misfit here. But I tell you what, to be fair, I'll swap the minor thirds out for the major to give it a fair run. It's still not great, is it? No great. No great. Get it? How'd the old punometer do there? Alright, okay, fair enough. Moving on. And what if I just play it once in passing? Let's give it the fairest shot possible. I mean, it's an improvement, but to my ears it's still just not sitting all that well. So I put it to you that while you likely have more improvisational freedom in terms of note choice than you might initially think, there is still a bit of a wall in regard to what we, or indeed your audience, are willing to put up with. In a nutshell, rockers, stick to your keys. If you go between them like the modal interchange here, maybe go for a more smooth transition, a bit like the dimmer switch analogy from my Phrygian blue scale video, again a little eye up there for more on that, and try and stay clear of the major third when playing in a minor key as well, that's the main takeaway. Alright, if you want to give it a go, here's the original lick with the tab. If you've enjoyed this more interesting outsound, then why not check out these exotic and hybrid scales. This has been Quick Guitar Tricks, that's the playlist there. But yeah, hit subscribe to keep up to date with the channel, leave me a comment, check out the tabs on my Patreon, and enable all notifications by ringing that little bell on the side if you feel so inclined. Cheers guys.